Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the little bit of a pre-show that we have going on now. We're just discussing today's show, some of the salient details, and we've got about a half a minute before we go live on the radio station over at Subspace Odyssey Radio. So, everybody, hang on to your butts. This is going to be an interesting show. And let me make sure I've got the stream up. I do. My timer. We're just about ready to roll, Wendy. So we're going to go dark. Well, greetings, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Hey, Wendy. How you doing?
Scotty, I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing just grand. And here it is, 4 p.m. here in central United States. And it's 10 p.m. over there in London, England.
It is.
Have you had a good day?
It's been productive, yes. Thank you very much. How about yourself?
It's been an all right day.
Good.
It was productive, I guess you could say, as well.
And may I say you look very spiffy tonight. You look very well. Look lovely.
Why, thank you very much. Coming from a beautiful woman in an awesome corset that has a lot of weight to it.
Bada boom.
Bada boom. And so I hope everyone joining us is in good spirits tonight, because we're going to maybe bring those spirits down a little bit in nature, but at the same time give you some very intriguing stories and information. And I'm trying to think if there's anything we want to say before we prelude into the show. Maybe let's take people in a totally different direction, then we'll jerk them into the reality of the topic. So Wendy, you do readings. Do you do readings for people?
I do.
Can they call you, contact you?
Well, they can contact me, and if I can help, I'll give it a go.
All right, give it a go. All right, I like that. And how do you feel about doing that for people? Do you do readings for people you know, or do you prefer to not know much about them? How is it that you attack that topic?
If I prefer obviously not to know, because I prefer to read for someone I don't know. But if I do know them, I will just do a basic reading, and so I won't ask any questions. I won't ask them to go into any thing, because I don't want to know, because that way I can help people more.
All right. Well, that's good. Well, let's say hi to some people. I see Cordia is here. Good to see you, Cordia. And Sandra Saunders is here from your neck of the woods.
Hey, Sandra.
Probably there's just a few streets over to the west. We've got Barbie D is here, and Steph Cuervo Queen is here. And I think I saw Field Guy and Remelian and Allison and Josh Kemp. And if I missed anybody, if it's not by active omission, it's by active not seeing you yet. So, and a bunch of other people gathered. And so it's good to have you. Come on over into the chat room. If you'd like to talk, we'll stick around after the show for a little bit and be able to talk with you a little bit more. Now, let's take that hard left turn into murder. And murders of passion, killing, as we called the show, crimes of passion. And allow me just a few minutes to kind of let people know what we're talking about when we're talking about crimes of passion. I think everybody has kind of an idea of what a crime of passion is, but what is it legally? And then we'll get into several different ways to look at this. So let me see where that went. Crimes of passion. Now, this is from the Cornell Law School here in the United States. A criminal law, a crime of passion. In criminal law, a crime of passion is a crime that's committed in the heart of passion or in response to provocation, as they put it, as opposed to a crime that was premeditated or deliberated or cold blood killing. And provocation serves as a partial defense to a charge of murder, because while it does not completely excuse the defendant of the killing, it can downgrade the degree of the crime and therefore the associated punishment. For example, successfully showing that a killing occurred in the heat of passion may lower a murder charge to a manslaughter charge. Now, I suppose this would be as if you're talking about, a man that comes home and finds his wife in bed with his best friend, and he shoots them both. In the crazed moment of passion, he still commits the murder, and he's still culpable for the murder, and he can still be convicted for that murder, but there are special allowances made if his attorneys can prove the moment of passion, almost like an insanity plea. And let me ask you, Wendy, can the crime of passion, when we're talking about passion, take it out of just the context of murder or killing or violence? Can passion, whether it's positive, negative, and any of the scale in between, can passion be a thing, do you think, that handles us harshly sometimes by what I mean by that is we're not always responsible for the way we act. As in the play Camelot, can passion be selected? He says when he finds his wife falls in love with his best friend. So there's passion of all kinds. So crimes of passion, passion then by itself, and I want your opinion on this. Can passion be controlled? Is passion something that can overtake you in both the positive realms and the very negative realms?
Well, it's interesting because, as the French call it, crime passionnel, which basically means it's under the umbrella of temporary insanity. I think everybody that's loved somebody or everybody that's had a relationship with somebody, whether it's a family, whether it's a lover, if we've had that type of relationship, we've all had those moments where you're like, you just snap. Whether you have been under pressure, whether you have been taunted and abused, or there's been infidelity, alcohol, drugs, anything like that. I think that, when it's like you instantly react to a situation, you just respond in a way which is obviously from the heat of the moment. And it's like, they say that people that do a crime of passion are driven by an instinct that is so strong that it eclipses the ability to have reason. Like, why didn't I stop myself? Why didn't I listen?
Yes.
And this is it's almost like it's an immediate reaction. And obviously the one thing that people can say is, well, it was self-defense, or I was protecting someone else. I was stopping them hurting someone else. So I took it into my own hands to stop that crime being, occurring. But also, I think people have been quite worried because obviously there are loopholes where over the law, over time, domestic violence, there has been the crime of passion defense can be loopholes for someone forgiving of criminals who are prone to perhaps mini psychotic episodes.
Sure.
And there also can be some personality disorders where, you can just a psychotic or a narcissistic or even a sociopathic, you can just snap. And at that time, at that moment, you're just someone else. And I think what made me look at this subject tonight is I think that everybody has had moments in their lifetime where they have either been in a relationship or they know of someone, they're like, and you've heard people say, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him, right? I'm done. I want them gone. I wish they were dead or whatever. And sometimes when people say that, it's just a matter of words.
Right.
Sometimes there can actually be that absolute truth to it. This is why I brought it up, because it's also like, if you love someone and they're with someone else, you've probably heard this. Well, if I can't have you, no one's going to have you.
No one can have you. That's an incredibly, by the way, it's an incredibly narcissistic thing to say and do and act on. So, yeah, I've heard that before.
So it's a very, you know, a narcissistic person, it would be very, very different to someone that's been in an abusive relationship and just snapped. You know, it's very different. And that's why when I sent you that message this morning going, we should do this.
Yeah.
We were looking at a particular very important case in the United Kingdom, which happened on the 13th of July, 1955. A beautiful woman called Ruth Ellis was the last woman to be hanged in the United Kingdom for murder. She killed her lover and partner, David Blakely. And it's not a straightforward case, even though she admitted to shooting him. It isn't straightforward. And on top of that, she came from a very abusive, tormentive background. And also, had you brought this case up today in the United Kingdom, this would have gone like for like, you know, diminished responsibility or whatever, temporary insanity or whatever, because you know, Ruth Ellis was she was a beautiful woman who'd come from a very, very difficult background. You know, her father, Arthur, he and her, I'm just trying to bring up her mum's name so I can bring up her mum's name. So she was born in 1926. She died in 13th July 1955. And she was what was called a British nightclub hostess, which means when you went into a nightclub, people would be like, she would welcome you. She would make you feel, she would make you feel welcome. And so in her teens, she'd been, you know, in the whole world of nightclub and welcoming people, and that would involve being involved in various relationships with men. And one of these guys was called David Blakely, who was a racing driver.
And what I read on that, and I've got some of the notes right here, that they met through mutual friends at the Little Club in Mayfair.
Yeah.
And a notorious anything goes place where the Krays, capital K,
that's right,
where the Krays visited, and where Ellis was a hostess and a manager. And together they shared an alcohol-fueled, passionate, and violent relationship, so says this particular article, until Blakely wanted out, prompted Ellis to seek out his hiding place in Hampstead on Easter Sunday of 1955. So she wasn't even 30 years old yet.
She was 28. He was 25. But I mean, just to give a hint of her background, she was the fifth of six children. They lived in Hampshire in England. Her mother was a Belgian war refugee. Her father was a cellist from Manchester. Everything seemed to be going okay. And then Arthur's twin brother, her dad's twin brother, Charles, was killed, sadly, when his bicycle collided with a steam wagon. And according to Ruth's sister, Muriel, Arthur then became physically and sexually abusive shortly after his brother's death. So he just snapped. And then the mum was aware that he was abusing, but she did nothing about it. And it got so bad that in the end, he made Muriel, his eldest daughter, pregnant. She was 14 at the time. And the child, a boy, when he was born, her mum took it on and said, "Oh, it's my son. I gave birth to him naturally," when actually it was her grandchild. It was a terrible way to be brought up. As obviously then the child being born, Arthur turned his attention towards Ruth. But Ruth was like, he's not doing that to me. I'm not going down that road. So she very much rebelled against him. And I think having that background of being a father sexually preying on you and being abusive would make you straight away defensive and protective of yourself. She seemed to go a bit haywire in her teens. And when she was 17, Ruth got pregnant by a married Canadian soldier. And she gave birth to a son named Claire Andrea Nielsen, who was actually her name. And he was known as Andy. And their father, Canadian father, sent money for a year for this child and then stopped. And so then Ruth had to go out to support her child by different jobs. And so one of the jobs she became to bring the money in was a nightclub hostess in Hampstead. She also did nude modeling work, which paid lots more money, as you can imagine.
Sure. All the nudes I do pay me lots of money.
Imagine that the time back then, women didn't have much power. We really, really didn't. We were still seen as second class and down there.
Property.
So she was making money as a full service escort, and she became pregnant again by one of her regular clients. But she had this pregnancy terminated illegally in the 3rd month. Well, that's not fun at all. No. And then she had to return to work.
The 3rd trimester or the 3rd month?
The 3rd month.
Okay.
So she was 3 months pregnant.
All right.
And it's still not a good time to be, the earlier, as you know, if you're going to do something like that is probably the safer thing to do. She then went on to, I'm just giving a background here. In 1950, she married 41-year-old George Ellis. He was a divorced dentist with 2 sons. And he was a regular at one of the clubs. He was violent and a possessive alcoholic who became completely convinced that his wife was having an affair. She left him several times, but always came back. And she gave birth to their daughter, Georgina, in 1951. He refused to accept that this was his daughter, and they separated shortly and later divorced. So there you go. Just in that few years, she's got abusive father.
Right.
She's got pregnant early, where the man has walked out and left her with the child. She's then got pregnant and had to have an illegal abortion, and then she got married to a violent and possessive alcoholic. I mean, talk about choice of men, we pick them. And then in 1951, while she had been 4 months pregnant, she actually appeared uncredited in a film called Lady Godiva Rides Again.
Oh.
So she actually appeared as a beauty queen. There's just a really short clip of her. And unfortunately, she returned to prostitution following her divorce from Ellis, having moved into her parents' home with her daughter. So she's now got 2 children, 2 young children back at home, but doing the prostitution. And obviously at this time, around 1953, she had many admirers. Many admirers came to her club. Sure. They wanted to, lavish her with gifts, buy her drink, whatever. She was a good time girl. And that's how she kept her living. And a lot of people in those days, they did that. Now, she met David Blakely, who was 3 years her junior through racing driver Mike Hawthorne. And Blakely is what could be described as a very charming, elegant playboy. Sure. He was a public school boy. He'd been educated really well, but he was a hard drinker, and he was, a racer. And within weeks of them meeting, he moved into the flat, despite being engaged to another woman. And she became pregnant, Ruth, for a 4th time, but she then had a second termination because she felt that he could not commit and he wasn't ready to be a dad.
And, back
That's a
in
lot.
that time period, we're talking the late 50s, the early 60s, that wasn't as common a thing to do as it is nowadays.
No.
I personally know women who have gone through more than 2 or 3 abortions, and they basically used it as birth control as
Yeah.
opposed, but nowadays that just seems so out of the question. It's so rare that you would find that anymore. But there was a time where it became a very easy thing to do, and in her day, that was a very hush hush thing. That was a very
Well, it was illegal.
reputation killing thing to do if it was ever found out.
Well, it was illegal, but not only that, you could die through it because
It was
backstreet
illegal, yeah.
abortions were botched. A lot of them were botched. A lot of them weren't at all hygienic, and a lot of people died or became really ill and then couldn't have children afterwards because they,
Right.
the infection went to the ovaries or whatever and caused scarring and blocking. So she was taking a risk. But this is a woman who'd lived on the edge. She was bringing up, 2 small children. She'd been in an abusive relationship. She'd had an abusive father. She was, somebody that had been in that lifestyle. So when she met him and they were instantly attracted to each other, it was a love-hate relationship. Couldn't be with you, couldn't be away from you.
Right.
And I think that she tried. I mean, there's obviously the story that she then began to see a guy called Desmond Cusson, who was a Royal Air Force pilot, and he had flown Lancaster bombers during the Second World War. And he actually was involved in Cusson and Co., which was an incredibly good company to be with back then. It was very well to do. So she moved in with him. But apparently she couldn't give up David Blakely, and she would go between Desmond and David, and she would go between this menage a trois.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Blakely became more and more violent. And sadly, this is where it becomes really, really sad. He offered to marry her. David Blakely offered to marry her. She said, yep, great. Let's go for it. But in January 1955, she had another miscarriage as he punched her in the stomach during an argument. Now, you can imagine what that must have felt like to her. He's asked to marry her, and then he went out drinking. Apparently, the story goes he went out drinking and then said, I've changed my mind. I don't want to do this.
Right.
So you're bouncing between a man who's like on, off. I want you. I don't want you. I love you. I don't love you. I'm going to sleep with other women. She would sleep with other people. There's a lot of toxic relationship, a lot of abuse, but I can relate to some of this because being in an abusive relationship where you're told, I love you, I want to be with you, and then they change their mind. Oh, I meant it at the time, but I don't mean it now. It plays with your head.
Sure.
And you start to turn into someone that you don't want to be. You start to turn into someone where you're like, I don't know what's the truth anymore and what's not. And where the heart is involved, it's powerful.
Even those things, as grating as they are on our psyches, those are overcomable things.
Yes.
But it's not easy to overcome, but they're overcomable things. Mental and emotional abuse, which we've talked about on this show before, is sometimes so subtle that you don't recognize it right away and what it's doing to you. But then you throw in on top of that the not so subtle of the physical abuse, which he was wreaking on her.
Well, yeah, it was so bad that the police were often called to their flat, and they would come in, the police, and they would see her covered in bruises. And back then, it was domestic violence. It was domestic.
Right.
Police really didn't get involved in it. And actually still, there are some things in this.
To some extent, yeah.
In the UK, where the police just go, it's domestic, it's we're not getting involved in domestic. So they knew this abuse was going on. They knew that they were both, it was well known that they were both into hitting each other, but then they couldn't be without each other. There was this lust and love to keep coming back and forth.
Right.
But I think after she lost that baby and she found out that there was another woman on the scene, that he was drinking, that he was basically playing with her, she snapped.
By the way, did they know whose child that was, the third one? Was it his child? It was Blakely's?
Yeah,
okay.
So on Easter Sunday in 10th of April 1955, she took a taxi from Desmond's home, who was the other gentleman that she was seeing.
The airman, yeah.
So she's seeing Desmond and David Blakely. She's seeing both of them. And she took a taxi from Desmond's home and she went to a friend's house because she heard David was there, and she thought, well, I'm going to go there and see if I can catch him in the act. When she got there, he had just drove off. So she paid off the taxi and she walked a quarter mile to the Magdala, which was a pub in London in South Hill. And she found his car parked outside. So she waited.
Oh my.
She didn't go in, which some may say would have saved a lot of things had she done.
Sure.
But she waited. And around 9:30 at night, he came out. And as he passed her, she was obviously waiting on the pavement on the side where the pub was, and she stepped out. And he was obviously trying to get the keys to his car. He was more preoccupied with what he was doing. He didn't see her there. She had her handbag. She took out a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson Victory model revolver. I think I got that right.
Yes.
And she fired 5 shots at him. The first shot missed him. And then she followed him as he started to run around the car because she was like, well, you're going down. And she fired a second shot, which caused him to collapse. She then stood over him and fired 3 more bullets.
Oh my.
One bullet fired less than half an inch from his back, leaving powder burns on his skin. She obviously was determined to do it. And as she stood over him, she repeatedly tried to fire the 6th shot. And eventually it ricocheted off the ground and actually went into a bystander's hand who lost the use of her right thumb. It just missed him and bounced, but it was too late. I mean, she went, I mean, she's leaning over him and she's like, it was in his liver, his heart, it was, she'd done enough to finish.
She wanted to make sure he wasn't getting back up.
Yeah. And she actually asked his best friend who was with him at the time, Clive, she actually said to him, will you, although she was obviously in shock, she said, will you call the police? She was arrested immediately. She kept saying, look, I'm guilty, but I'm confused. His body was taken to hospital with multiple fatal wounds to the intestines, liver, lung, aorta, and trachea. And the revolver actually is now in the Metropolitan Police Crime Museum. So you can still find that. When they took her into the police station, she was apparently quite calm. No drugs, no drink. She was very quiet, very cooperative, very, very helpful. She admitted what she did. She was twice examined by a medical officer who failed to find any form of mental illness, which I find absolutely crazy considering she just had a miscarriage or was in an abusive relationship.
Once again, the times have changed now. And the more we learn about the mind and the way the mind works.
Exactly. And also she was examined by a psychiatrist and he said no insanity. She knew what she was doing. So then when she appeared at court on the 20th of June, 55, at the Old Bailey, because most murder cases are done at the Old Bailey in London, in England, she was dressed in a black suit and a white silk blouse. She bleached her hair. She looked really good. And the defending counsel said, look, maybe you shouldn't look like that. Maybe you shouldn't have your dyed hair because we want you to look like more innocent. She said, look, I'm me. And I'm going to go as
who I am. This is what I did.
And when the prosecutor said, when you fired that revolver at close range into the body of David Blakely, what did you intend to do? Her answer was, it's obvious. When I shot him, I intended to kill him. And that's what gave her the guilty verdict and the mandatory
Yes.
death sentence. It took
Right.
20 minutes to convict her.
Oh my.
Yeah.
So they saw that as pretty, and you know, I get torn. You take yourself out of the passion of the case, the word passion again, or the pathos or the ethos of the case, and you look at it and you say, well, this is definitely one person who killed another person. They should be held accountable for that. And then, of course, depending on all the details, was he an abuser of her? Was it self-defense?
Yep.
Was she ridding herself of the person who was her abuser? And so I can see why it may have gone through rather quickly, and they found her guilty rather quickly, because to them it was cut and dried.
And I also think there was a part of Ruth, you know, having seen it, she loved this man. She didn't just love him, she adored this man.
Yeah.
He was everything to her. Although she was having a relationship with Desmond, she was in love with this guy, and she killed him. And then maybe there was a part of her that was like, well, I'm going to be with him, right? I'm going to be with him because I know I'm going to die.
Yeah, it might have been.
So, and if there actually was a film made called Dance with a Stranger, you can find it on Amazon or whatever. And it's the story of what happened. But I think also she had 2 young children, 3 and 10. And literally her sister, who'd Muriel, she never believed that Ruth killed David. She believed that Desmond actually shot him at a distance and framed Ruth. She went to her deathbed saying, my sister did not kill him.
Oh my.
He was killed by Desmond. So there was this kind of like, you know, none of this was looked into. And also the bullets and everything, because one of these bullets was shot at a distance and yet it wasn't checked into. And even now people argue over that, like as in the, you know, when you fire a bullet, you know, obviously if you're standing over him, you can tell where that's going in, but one came definitely from a distance. They tried to campaign, Scotty. I mean, this poor girl, they really, lots of people campaigned, but unfortunately, they asked her where she got the gun, right?
Right.
Because, you know, back then, you know, you could still get guns, obviously, in the UK.
Right. In
but
England.
It wasn't just every man on the street. But I don't believe she ever told them.
Wow.
She never told them. But then, as time went on, just before she died, she actually divulged that it was the Desmond cousin had given her the gun and taught her how to use it on the weekend prior to the murder.
Oh my.
So was he preparing her? Was he protecting her? I don't know.
Or did he even know that was her intention? Was he just, she said, hey, I want a gun and I want to learn how to use it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll show you.
And I also think that helped premeditate her, because it was like, well, look, you were asking to be trained how to use a gun. But actually, you know, I mean, a lot of people do. Back in the old days, when we used to have guns here, you'd be like, oh, let's have a go. Teach me how to use it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a final letter to David Blakely's parents, she wrote, I have always loved your son and I shall die loving him. Now, I'm not sure what comfort that actually brought to his parents. But on the day of her execution, on the 13th of July, 1955, just before 9 a.m., the hangman, who was very famous, and this is someone else I'd like to look at in time, Albert Pierpoint. He's the famous hangman of the United Kingdom, who actually has killed, or rather should say hung, between 435 to 600 people in a 25-year career. He was her hangman that day. And he and his assistant entered her cell And he took it very seriously, his job. There was no joking. There was no harshness. It was always gentle. It was always kindness, because he believed that the last thing you could do was give someone, an easy way to go. So he took her to the execution room where she was hanged. Now, a lot of newspaper reports have said she smiled at him, but he actually stood by and said, no, she didn't. She was very nervous, and she tried to, but there was no smile there. Now, as customary in British executions back then, she was buried within an unmarked grave within the walls of Holloway prison, which was a woman prison.
Mm-hmm.
And in the early 70s, they were exhumed and reburied elsewhere. She was then in the hands of her son, Andy, and he took her remains and buried her in the church of St. Mary's Church in Amersham, Buckinghamshire, where Blakely was 3 point miles where he was buried. And she had a plain headstone with Ruth Hornby, 1926 to 1955. Now, before I go on with that story, because obviously it gets worse than that, Scotty, I just wanted to say to you, this is a story of a woman who loved a man, had a toxic relationship, on, off, I don't want you, I do want you, lust. It just goes to show that, as Davy Jones said in the Pirates of Caribbean, love can be a terrible bond, and it can actually take you to the place. I mean, is that really love? Is that really love or insanity?
That's the question. And there again comes the question I asked at the very beginning about passion. Is passion something that it can be a good thing, but it can be a bad thing? Is passion something overall that is a form of mental illness? It's something that, because you can be passionately in love with somebody, and not intend to do violence or do any violence, but so passionately in love that you make decisions that are wrong decisions, or you do wrong things, or you get yourself caught up into activities that don't work right because of your love, your passion for somebody.
Yeah.
And those can sometimes lead to what we see in this story is absolute violence. So,
I mean, as we covered a couple of months ago now, when love turns into violence, I mean, I think there are people out there that will know exactly where we're coming from. You meet someone, you fall in love, it's all butterflies and everything, and then it turns toxic. And the next thing you know, there's violence, there's alcohol, there's drugs, there's infidelity. It then turns nasty.
right.
And it happens, I mean, further on, we'll look at that further today. But with Ruth's case, I actually feel quite strong for her, because this is a woman who had just had a miscarriage. Her hormones would have been all over the place.
Sure.
She was in a domestic violence relationship. I mean, none of this was taken into consideration. They didn't look at Desmond Cusson for his part or anything in that. It was literally, it's all her, because she said, I did it, I shot him. There was no other, in their book, there was no other evidence.
Right.
And then when they used to give you the death sentence, they would put the black cap on.
Yes.
You would know you were going to die, because the main judge, he'd put the black cap on, and he would say, I sentence you to be hung until,
by the neck until dead. Yes.
Exactly. But the thing is, with Ruth's story, it was actually not, it actually affected the whole family, because her former husband, George Ellis, committed suicide by hanging in 1958. In 1969, her mother was found unconscious in a gas-filled room, and she never fully recovered and did not speak coherently ever again. Her son, Andy, who was 10 at the time of his mother's execution, took his own life in a bedsit in the UK in 1982, shortly after desecrating his mother's grave.
Oh, my.
And her daughter, Georgina, who was only 3 when her mother was executed, was fostered when her father killed himself, and she died of cancer in 2001, aged 50.
So everybody involved is gone.
It's the last person, obviously Desmond. Interesting fact I wrote about him. On the morning of the execution of Ruth Ellis, somebody put 3 bowls of roses and left them on David Blakely's grave. To this day, no one has ever found out who did that.
Oh my.
Another one is obviously 3 months after her death, her sister called Betty, she was 18. She died of a sudden asthma attack. Obviously, then her ex-husband went on to hang himself, and they looked at his watch and it stopped at 7:50 a.m. And then the last one, Desmond Cousins, who was obviously her lover, her other lover, who gave her the gun, who taught her how to have a gun. In 1991, he had a fall and he fractured and dislocated his neck, which I actually find quite spooky connection, actually.
Wow.
Right? So when you see this case and you see the effect it's gone to all the family and everyone who was involved, this is the reason why Ruth Ellis, when we talk about it, it's a case that should have been looked at, why this woman should never have been hung. Why hasn't she been pardoned? And why hasn't her case been looked again? Because it should be.
Yeah. Maybe, it doesn't do much good to posthumously pardon someone. They're already gone. All it does is, it's something for reputation.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. You mentioned this to me before. It's 444 here. The number of angels, by the way. Last hanged woman's ghost haunts Penn, the author says. And she was the last woman ever hanged in Britain, and she could still be haunting a churchyard in Penn, or so a paranormal researcher believes.
Yeah.
And it was author and photographer Eddie Brazel, 54, has been researching for his book about haunted churches around England. Reminds me of Mark English.
Yes.
Going around to all the old churches in England. Yeah. But his work has led him into to the idea that the ghost of Ruth Ellis, who was executed in 1955, may be returning to the site where she was murdered. Where she murdered her lover, David Blakely. And the first tale of ghostly apparitions comes from a Penn farmer, or a Penn farm worker, who was killed when he fell from his horse in the 18th century. And his ghost was said to appear in the churchyard and so on. And the 1980s, the figure of a woman in white was seen to leave the churchyard by the east gate and walk down the hill, which runs by the side of the churchyard. And I'll go on with this for a little bit. It's just a few paragraphs. Hazelmere resident Eddie explained, nobody knows the identity of the apparition, he said. But the Crown Public House across the road, they have a woman in white. We found out that David Blakely, who was murdered by Ruth Ellis, is buried in Penn Churchyard. And they used to drink in the Crown Pub. She told Blakely's parents that she loved him, and ghost identification is a weird business. We thought, could it be the ghost of Ruth Ellis still pining for Blakely? And Eddie said he is a believer in ghosts and thinks eventually science may prove their existence, so on, so on. It's my opinion that ghosts do exist, he said. There's a theory gaining ground on the scientific table, and it goes on and on. And he gives his opinions on things. But he thinks that might be her.
There's also Caesar's nightclub in Streatham, which isn't that far from me, that they reckon they've seen her there before.
Really?
Ghosts of the Cray twins, who once frequented the club. And Most Haunted, if you like that show, actually did a paranormal investigation in 2003 there. And they felt that there was a couple of spirits there, and one of them was Ruth Ellis.
That's
Whether or
interesting.
not it was her, I don't know. The thing is, Scotty, when we look at this case, nowadays you would call it battered woman syndrome.
Sure.
And what's really interesting, and I was just bringing up this point here, she'd only had the miscarriage 10 days ago before she shot him. So 10 days ago, he'd punched her in the stomach. She'd miscarried a baby. And during that time after the so think about this guy. He's 25.
Yep.
Women want him. He's a good-looking guy. He's a bit of an arsehole, but, pardon the pun. But he's going from one woman to another. He's drinking. He's racing cars. He looks great. And he's got Ruth, who's absolutely madly in love with him. And she's literally like hanging on to his every word. And he's saying, I want to be with you. I love you. And all this malarkey. And then next day, it's like, I've changed my mind. I don't want to do it. That is enough to make anybody go insane. And she was frantically, when he said he was going to marry her and he wanted to be with her, she was frantically trying to find him. And, he was just out living it up. But the other thing as well with this, back then in those days, men were free to do as they pleased with their property, right? Yeah. And women were seen as, it was like if you saw a husband pull his wife or drag her down the street and hit her, or sexual assault, it was women were objects of men and they were free to do as they pleased.
Well, she obviously deserved that. She provoked him.
Absolutely.
It's the attitude that existed.
And I wanted to, if anyone wants to look up what's his name? Albert Pierpoint. This was his words that he wrote. He actually retired in 1956. So a year after she died, he retired. And he actually said, all the men and women whom I have faced at that final moment convince me that in what I have done, I have not prevented a single murder. And if death does not work to deter one person, it should not be held to deter any. Capital punishment, in my view, achieves nothing except revenge.
Oh, my.
That is a very, very strong statement.
I'm looking at a picture of him right now. And I want to show you this. If you have not seen this before, this is an incredibly gentle-looking man in the face. If you take a look at this fellow, let's see. Let me put it up for everybody to take a look at. Albert, I'll just call this. I have to save it on my computer so we can show it. All right, here, let me go over here and let's bring him up. Now, here is the executioner himself, who, as I saw, he was hired to do between 425, they estimate, and 600 executions in his lifetime.
Yeah.
Let's see, here he is. It's going to take 2 seconds to load him up.
He was very well known. Very well. And he had a very interesting background as well. Very interesting.
He looks like your grandfather. He looks like a gentleman. And, but it was a just profession back then. And here he is. There he is. Albert Pierpoint, the executioner.
Apparently he was very eloquent, and his record for escorting a prisoner to the gallows, trapdoor, and dropping them to their death was 7 seconds.
Wow.
You were done in 7 seconds. He was, he executed quite a few famous people as well. He did David, what's his name? Derek Bentley, who there was a film named after that, Let Him Have It. Derek Bentley was actually, I'm trying to bring it up here just quickly. He was from, I believe it was Croydon. Oh, where is it, David Bentley? It's going to bug me till I find it now. Derek Bentley. He was 19. He was killed at Wandsworth Prison in 1953. He had the mental age of 11, and he was hanged for the murder of PC Sidney Miles. He was not holding the gun, which was wielded instead by Christopher Craig, who at 16 was ineligible for the death sentence. Bentley was later given a posthumous pardon. But when you go to hang a boy of 19 years old, it does not matter if he's tall and broad-shouldered. For at 9 o'clock in the morning, if he's to die, he still looks like a boy. And as he went into Derek Bentley's cell on the 28th of January, 1953, he sat at his prison table watching the doorway, and he was so, when he went in, young Derek Bentley looked at him and he seemed to be quite happy to see this gentleman come in to see him. And then he saw the yellow strap in my right hand and his eyes fixed upon it. And the sight of this wiped all the hope from his expression. And he stood up slowly and clumsily. We expected trouble, he says, with Bentley. We knew he was physically strong, although simple-minded. He'd been so sure he wouldn't hang. And I must say, he was 6 feet tall, a weightlifter and a boxer with a brain younger than his body. He jumped at the sudden opening of the door. I'm sure he had still not properly weighed up the situation. He moved his shoulders wonderingly, but did not say anything. I whispered, just follow me, lad. It's all right, Derek. Just follow me. He started to move and his body caught the edge of the table. He appeared not to feel this, although the table shook. And I put the white cap over his head and noosed with it, and I heard the familiar click of the belt and buckle. The controversy from this became, huge because obviously Derek Bentley died and he was innocent, and now it was proved he was innocent. And Ruth Ellis went through exactly the same as that hanging. She'd have gone exactly the same way, 7 seconds, really, really quickly if it was that quick. And she should never have been killed. And when you look at today's crimes of passion, and they're still going on, let's look at O.J. Simpson.
They are.
O.J. Simpson with Nicole Simpson, 1999, killed her. Then you have Oscar Pistorius, who shot his girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp, in 2013, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's still in prison serving. And then you have people like Marvin Gaye, who was killed after an argument with his own father, right?
Right. And how many, did you look this up by any chance? The question just comes to my mind. How many, if somebody out there would look this up, who's listening, how many murders are committed by people who are in the same family or the same relationship? That would be interesting to find out. I would dare say that there's a majority of them they're all related, or they all have a relationship of one form or another.
I mean, even, dare I say, John Wayne Bobbitt, he had his dismemberment, right? Because from his wife. When you're involved in a relationship and passion and feelings run high, some people just snap if there's reasons to do it. However, you've got to be careful with that. Now, we don't have the death penalty in the UK anymore. So you're going to go in for life or for many years if that happens. You guys still have the death penalty. So if it happens over there, then you can die for it.
Now, it's interesting. This just came to my mind. I forgot about this. Is that my ex-wife, on a couple of occasions, had said to me, if I had a gun on that day or with that argument we had, she said, I'd have shot you.
Yeah.
And the thing about her, though, is that what led to the demise of our marriage was the fact that she was not a well person mentally. Yeah. She was beautiful. She was fun, exciting. But on the other hand, she was an emotionally mental mess. Yeah. And still is to this day, I think. Although I have no communication with her now. But and you have to wonder, when a judge gives a man his children, there's usually a better reason than just the guy presented a better case. Yeah. So I think about that, and I thought back to the incident. I don't remember what incidents she was referring to, but I thought, what have I ever done to my ex-wife to have prompted her to want to kill me?
Mhm.
It's like, what did I do that deserved that? And it's because it's all those crimes of passion. It's that crime of the moment. It's that crime of something that's driving you to act a certain way or do a certain thing because you're over the top emotionally. Now, I think she had other problems going on, but I can honestly say I have never. And I got to tell you this: I had a good old friend of mine that's a pastor, and we were sitting with a bunch of guys, and one of the guys said, talking to him, and he said, they said, have you ever considered divorcing your wife for any reason ever? Did that ever come across your table? He goes, oh, no, no, no. He says, divorce, no. He said, axe murder? Yeah. And we all laughed about that, and it was a joke, obviously. But what is it about? And I'm asking you, Wendy, I'm asking people that are listening, what is it that drives us to the point where we are so angry at someone that even flashes across our mind, even if we would never do it? Now, because I've never once, I can honestly say, considered killing anybody.
I think you have to get to that point mentally. And I
Mhm.
think I was in that abusive relationship, and there were times I remember his mother saying to me, I knew it was time to get out of the relationship, her relationship with his father, when I was thinking of ways of killing him and getting away with it. And I remembered when I was in then a relationship with her son, and I was going through abuse and torment and all this kind
Mhm.
of stuff. I actually just thought the world would be better off without him. And maybe,
Oh,
and I remember saying to him one day, hell, they put me in prison for some years and do me for insanity, but I'm doing the world a favor. Now, I never did it,
obviously,
but I
yeah.
have to say, when someone torments you and pushes you to the point of insanity, and you don't know where you end and where rational reality comes into it, because it's
Mhm.
a one-off moment. You just snap. I
Right.
believe that that's what it is. I don't think you're a serial killer. I don't think that you go out to get involved in someone and think, God, they're annoying the hell out of me, I'm going to kill them. I think you have to be pushed to a point where there are certain factors that happen that set that chain of a chain of reaction. Like, for instance, Marvin Gaye. He was known to have a really tough relationship with his dad. They were always arguing with each other. They were always fighting. And his apparently that day of the argument, the family had tried to split them up and say, look, stop this, it's not worth arguing about. You know what it's like in families. You have an
Sure.
argument, the next thing you know, you're
Yeah.
in each other's face, and the family splitting you up, saying you need to stop. You need to stop this. Well, they did do that. And then his father came back with a gun and shot him. And actually, it was the gun, I believe, that Marvin had actually bought his dad.
Oh, nice.
So it just goes to show, when feelings run high, yeah.
Yeah.
I can
Well,
honestly say that I did want to, at one point, I just wanted to drown the bugger. I really did.
well, I hear that. Now my wife Rainey has said to me, she's never threatened to kill me. We've never been in an argument, I think, so bad that would precipitate that. But there was one time she was sitting around. She goes, I just thought of the best way to dispose of your body that I don't think anybody would ever know I killed you. And I said, oh, that's refreshing. Share it with me. And she went on to regale me about a metal box, drilling holes in it, submerging it in water, blah, 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 and so on. I said, wow, you have that well planned out. She goes, yes, I
Wow,
do.
that's scary.
She goes, yes, I do. And on that note, we have to say goodbye to the radio audience. We want to thank you. We're pushing it to the limit with the radio audience. And for time, And so we're going to get out of here. You can join us over on the YouTube channel, and you can chat with us there, where we'll continue this conversation for just a little bit more. And so all of you out there, live long and prosper. And you know what? Don't murder your spouse. Now, I have to ask you a question. Is there a fine line between a guy being abusive and a guy just being a dick? I mean, seriously, because sometimes I hear stories, and he was just so angry at me all the time, and we always argued, and he pushed me around, and not physically, but and so on. And I go, well, it sounds like you guys just didn't get along, you know.
I think there's definitely a line between abuse and someone being a dick, because abuse is far deeper than someone just being an arsehole, right?
Right.
And it can be a mental or emotional or physical or sexual abuse. Whereas if someone's just being a dick, you are, you're better off just walking away from them. But I think
sure,
in this case, when someone actually says, like Rainey just said, to you that time, I'm thinking of ways how I could kill you and get away with it. I'd be slightly concerned. I remember my mum telling me that my dad was a copper. And I remember my mum saying my dad once said to her in the heat of an argument, if I wanted to kill you, I'd get away with it. And actually, they actually had a friend who she was married to a fellow police officer, and they were in an abusive relationship. And she said to my mum, one day he's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. One day I'm just not going to turn up. And,
wow.
and she said, I guarantee you he's going to kill me. And obviously they hoped back then.
Why didn't she leave this guy?
Well, back then, it was a police officer's word against his wife, and she wanted the children, and taking the children away from a police officer is, as you know, back in the 70s, it was.
Oh, okay, this is a ways back, sure.
Different world. And eventually, yeah, she did die. He did kill her. And he was very good. He cleaned everything up and tried to cover everything up, but he buried her under, some say, a particular town where not far from here, which was being built at the time. And it, I don't understand. And he had a lover waiting, and actually, he got away with it. So, but everyone knew he was guilty. And that's what I'm saying is I think when you're in a different situation, to someone's being an arsehole to you, to someone's actually being abusive. And in Ruth's case with David, I mean, what made a 25-year-old arsehole punch a pregnant woman in the stomach?
Right. See, I just couldn't fathom doing that. And, that tells you a little bit about the kind of person that would do that.
Yeah.
I'm not the kind of person that would punch my pregnant wife in her stomach. I don't care how mad I was at her. Because I'd have presence of mind. Here we got Dave has just called in. Let's bring him in. Maybe he's got something he wants to add to this.
Oh my God,
Uncle Dave,
so many things. So many things. First of all, that hangman.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be the perfect character for a serial killer?
I'm sure it would.
Set it in Victorian times so as to not besmudge this poor man, but.
King's executioner.
The king's executioner, who's actually a serial killer and gets away with it and has killed hundreds with the permission of the crown.
Yes. A great story.
What an awesome story. Anyway, And I love the fact that he looks like everybody's grandfather.
Yeah, he does.
But but you want someone like that, because I think when you're on that last walk and you know you're going to die, you want to be like the Green Mile said. You keep them calm. You keep it all as much as you can.
Sure.
And everybody. He believed that everybody should go out with dignity. But
Yeah.
I do think, like if you look at Oscar, is it Pistorius? And his case, look how that was played out on the media. And, and he was saying, look, he thought it was a burglar coming in, because obviously in South Africa you don't leave everything open at night, and he left something open. He believed he had, and he heard the noise, and he went to wake her up, and he thought she was in the bed beside him, and then he took a gun and shot. I don't know how many shots it was into the bathroom where she died. And you just think to yourself, call me old-fashioned, but before you actually pick up a gun and shoot somebody or go to shoot someone, put the light on first of all, and look at what you're doing.
Well, or I think he shot through a door.
Yeah, he did.
So
bathroom on
if it was a burglar who's come through the bathroom window, which is really unusual, they're in the bathroom. They can't go anywhere except the bathroom. So it's not like they're going to sneak down a hall and go into some, right where they are. Call the cops, hold the gun on the door, and tell them, I have a gun aimed at this door. If you come through, I'll shoot you. The cops are on their way. And you sit and you wait.
Yes.
It's like, yeah.
I think it's really sad though, because obviously you could see obviously how much it affected him on that stand. I mean, he was a hero in South Africa. He was a
pariah.
Yeah, he was. So he was seen to do that. But Dave, when you think about back then, women were seen as property, which I still cannot get my head round. Right, going into
really,
I don't think it's that odd a thing.
I don't think it's that odd a thing either. It's like,
but it's like, what is
when you look at culturally everything in that time period, it was just part of the way everything was, and it's not hard for me to wrap my head around that. I understand that that's the way things were. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I'm just saying that it's really easy for me to look back and go, well, yeah, in the 50s, people would have considered the wife property.
But also premeditated, if you pick up a gun and you're going to go out looking for that person, right?
Yeah.
Premeditated, right? Because you're carrying a weapon, right?
You've set out, whether you have a weapon or not, you've set out with intent to do harm.
And that is the thing
that's premeditation.
That makes you guilty. And she stood up in her power and said, I'm guilty. She had a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old, but she still said, I'm guilty. I'll stand up for what I did, and I'm going to hang. And she knew that. She knew she was going to die. She knew that. They even tried to say to her, look, we can probably get this sorted. And she was like, don't. She knew. She'd almost accepted. And I think that it's like any crime today. If you pick up a weapon and you go looking for that person,
that's premeditation.
There is premeditation, but you also have what they call extenuating circumstances.
Absolutely.
Okay. Here's a case where he has caused the death of their child.
Yeah.
He was abusive to her. Even if he hadn't caused the death of her child, he was abusive to her. And I can understand where she would build the anger and say, I'm going to do him in. I'm going to get rid of him. I'm not going to.
Yeah.
And in some way, to me, it's the same as when a father kills the man that raped his daughter.
Yeah.
Or what have you. I look at that and I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't see this guy as somebody who's a threat to society. He's not going to go out and kill somebody else on the street. There was a reason that he took justice into his own hands, but if this man is guilty of this thing, then it was justified in my head.
There it is.
And if she can say, well, he killed our unborn child, well, too bad. It's justified then. It's self-defense, even if it's not in the moment.
But do you know when you're in love with someone and you're feeling
I know.
when you're feeling
I know.
oh,
I know.
oh, thank you, Uncle.
Stop looking at me like that, Uncle Dave.
Oh, sorry, Scotty.
When
No,
you're in
Amy and I were in a relationship like this.
Mm.
Okay. Love her to pieces. And every day I would go to bed thinking I can't possibly love you more than the day I do. And then the next morning I would wake up and I would love her even more. And we had been together. We had been engaged. We had separated. 10 years had gone by. She married, had two kids with other people or other person. And then their relationship was rocky, and we ran into each other and fell in love all over again. And we had always considered each other soulmates. It was meant to be, and it was not meant to be at the same time. I very much believe that we were part of a relationship in a previous life, and it was cut short. And we both sort of felt that way, and that this was our chance to have that relationship. And at the same time, there were all kinds of things that constantly came up that pushed us apart from each other.
So some people are like ill-fated lovers, aren't they? Let's be honest. They're like ill-fated lovers, and you just shouldn't be with each other. They just shouldn't be with each other. And you know people are like, why are you still with them? I've been there. I've been one of those people. And you go, those immortal 3 words. I love them. That is
we've been divorced more years than we were married. I love her just as much today, if not more.
Yeah.
And see, to me, as one of your closer friends, I was going to say closest, but I'm putting words in your mouth. You're one of my closest friends. I know you very well. And I look at you and I go, I don't get that, Dave, because she hasn't talked to you at all over the years.
I know.
She just wanted out and
since the day I've met her, there hasn't been a day go by that I don't think about her or the kids or talk about her and the kids.
I get that.
Yeah.
I keep her as part of my life.
Yeah, I know. And she doesn't want you in her life at all.
No.
And to me, that's a thing where I think that's a pretty good sign that says, move on from that.
This came off in 2005, and it's never more than 10 or 15 feet away from me.
Yeah. Well.
And you know, Uncle Dave, you are worthy of love, right? We are all worthy of love. And sometimes when we can't break that tie, or we can't move on from that person, we stop ourselves from receiving the kind of love that we should deserve. You know,
sure.
It takes a lot of strength to walk away from someone that you cared about so deeply, and you loved so much.
Oh, yeah.
Your heart, but at the same time, you do deserve love, to be loved, and be loved in the right way as well.
I just have to find the right English woman.
Exactly, and there's a few of us, right?
Really? I only know one.
Dave is not my radio wife. I will put it that way. There's nothing about his beard that I find sexy at all. Oh, I think Michael's back.
Scotty, you want my beard, if not for a toupee and nothing else.
If not for a toupee. Yes. So
Scotty, can you take down the Robertson so we can see Dave and Michael better?
Yeah. Yeah, we can do that.
Because otherwise we only see like half of them.
It shows up a lot differently over on my screen.
That's
I don't
okay.
get right. Yeah. I didn't notice that it was blocking anybody. But
hi, Michael.
Hey,
Michael.
He's still
Can you
fiddling.
hear us?
All right. He's still fiddling. We can see you. Can you hear us?
All right. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
I was going to.
Hi, John.
Wendy was. This was going to be.
I don't know what that clicking is. Is that you're trying to make something work?
Can you hear that clicking?
There was a fine line between.
I hear it clicking.
And I had with.
I've got to take him down.
What he's actually saying was there's a fine. His mum used to say there's a fine line between love and hate, which there absolutely is, because love and anger and love and hate, and it are very, very similar emotions. And I think we waste so many good years of our lives on the wrong people.
Well, and I pointed this out in the comments earlier, but it's why there's a reason they call love a sickness.
Right.
And of all the positive emotions, it's the only one that causes so much pain and anguish.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What's up with that?
And yet, what is it that, I mean, with Ruth, obviously she was, of all the lovers she had in her life, she was drawn to toxic lovers. And that's the thing, isn't it? A lot of us are drawn to the same kind of lover or relationship over and over again because, you know, whether it's our background or something we're used to or it's familiar, we just go back for more. And it's like, we must be insane. I know I was insane. I did 4.5 years of insanity, and then years
women
later,
are naturally attracted to the bad boy, and I don't know what that is. Amy was that way when I first met her on the Renaissance circuit. She was with just a series of jousters over, one after another, and they were all abusive to her, and like I remember one. So we would end each festival when we were on the road, wherever we were, with what we called the funky formal. And her and the guy she was dating at the time were coming in matching black and white outfits.
Oh my.
Okay. So she showed up in her black and white outfit, and finally he showed up with another chick in a black and white outfit.
Nice.
So
couldn't have let me know ahead of time, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's how he broke up with her. He just brought a different date to the party.
By the way, my other date should be assigned to you that I've broken up with you.
Yeah. And over and over again, she would come to cry on my shoulder, and I would white knight the situation. And yeah, that's.
It's so wrong when you look back and you go, like how many people have been involved with people that they've argued with, it's been toxic, they've fought with, and yet they go back and they go, you know what it's like, it's just us, it's just what we do, it's just the way it is. And then, I remember having calls from certain friends over the years, terrified, going, you need to come and get me, he's going to kill me, I'm terrified. And you think, oh my God. And with Ruth, she took that gun, she put it in her bag, and she was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And you know what? I would say that a part of me almost doesn't blame her why she wanted to do it.
Sure.
But, as much as I loved Amy, I could never see doing something like that, And I know that she tried to play that up during the divorce, because I taught sword and I had all these weapons in the house and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's so not who I am,
Right.
If is Michael, can he get back on, or can he not?
Michael's in the chat room. I just saw him pop in. I haven't seen him try to call back in yet, though. Michael, the connection was so bad audibly that I dropped you out of the chat, or out of the studio window. So if you want to try back, we can try to bring you in again.
But I remember being young and having huge argument with this toxic ex of mine, and almost like to the point of like feeling like I was losing my mind, I was going insane. And I don't think it wasn't a feeling of like all the time like I just wish you were dead, I just want to kill you. It was like, I think what happened is, after years and years of this going on, and my personality and my persona and my whole confidence level being pushed to underneath his feet and being broken, something just went, I can't do this anymore, and I just want him gone. Hey, he's back.
Hey, Michael, speak to us.
All right. I'm going to say, seen the abuse and stuff there. In the past, I've seen what my mother never have just if she would have killed him. Most days I would kill. I'm going to have to go through for it. I just doing.
That's really weird because he came
Michael?
on.
Just think it.
He
Yeah.
came on your show and it was really good, wasn't it?
Yeah, Michael, you've got some weird electronic ticks that are making it hard to
The
understand.
audio's in and out.
But yeah, it's
So frustrating.
work right.
That is.
I mean, Scotty's going to work on it. It's like I said, I don't. I've seen the final one age. You know, like I said, between my parents, you know, somebody that was a whole small, and it goes down.
I think what he's saying is that his parents were in a toxic relationship, and he saw his mum and his dad. Yeah, his mum and his dad he was in a toxic relationship. His dad used to beat his mum. He saw it a lot, and then one day his mum took this, the skillet to his dad and whacked him. But he grew up in that environment. And if we look at Ruth's children, there were 3 and 10. They would have seen that abuse. Now, isn't it weird that the boy, Andy, he had a terrible life. I mean, I actually feel for him. Like when he committed suicide and he desecrated his mum's grave before he died, it shows you his mental state of why he even felt he had to go and do that to his mum's grave, right?
But don't you feel, I mean, I think a lot of times when children live through that, they feel somehow they're responsible for that.
Yeah.
Okay. And who knows? We're not there for the arguments. Maybe he was saying, I can't afford you and these kids and all this stuff, or was complaining about the kids. So the kids feel then they're a catalyst. They're the reason that mom can't be happy with this person.
Well, I mean, if you think about Andy, like he was saying, like his mum was hung, his father didn't want to know him, his grandmother got gassed and never recovered, his stepfather was an alcoholic and hanged himself, and then he had so much psychological damage after that. He took his own life in 1982. Poor guy. Well,
and then you look at the Marvin Gaye situation, and don't you think that part of the anger between him and his dad was that, when the child becomes so much more successful, and you see it with like Macaulay Culkin too, where the child is the breadwinner.
There's a jealousy there. Yeah.
There's a jealousy there. There's some sort of inadequacy to the male psyche that I'm not good enough to support my family, but my kid is supporting my family.
Right.
Now Marvin Gaye was an adult when he became successful, but he was so much wealthier than the old man that I'm sure he was picking up a lot of the family's bills.
Oh, like a lot of those guys do.
Well, yeah, and that you would expect that in the culture. My parents have worked hard. They don't have a lot. I'm going to buy them a new house. I'm going to take care of mom's this, or I'm going to do that. And they're doing that out of the love in their heart but the old man takes it as a slight, but doesn't say anything, and it just builds up resentment.
Yeah.
And feels guilty about it, because he shouldn't feel guilty that his son is successful. He should be happy that his son is successful. But he does feel guilty, and because he feels guilty or anger towards it, it just builds this weird psyche thing up to where there's constantly arguments, and there doesn't need to be, but he can't help it.
I'm just reading something about when she shot him, because I wonder how she felt when when you're doing it, when you're shooting. Obviously, when she shot him, one wonders if she was like relief or anger or hurt. What was going on at that point? And then afterwards, she was calm, but she was like, I feel a little confused, but yeah, I did it. Why would she say that? I feel a little confused.
There was that interesting point of her actions was, what do they say when you see stabbing deaths and there's multiple stab wounds? they say that's obviously a crime that involves passion because it's a personal instrument of violence, and it's
Because when you don't really
administered
care about the
personally,
person,
and you're
poke
doing
them
it
once or
over and
twice
over
and
and
you're
over
done.
again. What did she do with that gun? She didn't shoot him from 100 yards with a high-powered rifle. She walked up and she shot him. He went down. She shot him again. She stood over. She shot him 3 more times. Bam, bam, bam. And that, I think, right there was very telling that it was a crime of passion.
Well,
Because,
that or he was definitely evil and he wasn't dying, and she was going to make sure
well,
that
there
he
was
did.
that too. Yeah, maybe that too.
Well, they were saying that the 5 shots she fired into his body, he stood no chance. His killing, as murders go, was unremarkable. Several people witnessed the shooting, and she never attempted to deny it. But should she have hanged? Was she guilty of murder and not manslaughter? But she acquired a gun. She was driven to a place she believed her intended victim was going to be. She shot him in cold blood, not once, but 5 times, which is not really self-defense, is it? And then no matter what her mind was, she knew what she was doing. She knew that she was just like, I'm going to do it. And it says she knew enough how many shots she had fired, for it seems she kept the last one for herself. So one wonders, was she going to kill herself? Only for the gun to jam. And then obviously when
Did somebody stop her? No, she walked over and asked somebody, you need to call the police.
Yeah, she asked
so
his
nobody
friend,
stopped her.
She asked his friend, go and call the police. And when the police, it was actually an off-duty police officer that came and arrested her, and she actually said to him, I shot him, but I am a little confused. So looking at that from that point of view, she's got the gun, she's driven there, she's seen him. So you could say she's guilty. But then if you look at Oscar Pistorius, he's asleep, he says. The girlfriend he thinks is beside him, he doesn't put the light on, and he fires the shots through the door. Self-defense, he calls it.
Yeah.
Different.
And I got to tell you, people say, well, why didn't you shoot to wound, or why did you shoot through the door? You know why? Because in those split seconds when you're making those decisions, and you're not a professional hitman or anything like that,
it's so hard to shoot to
1 to 2 seconds to decide how you're going to react to what you think is going on.
The shoot to wound thing is just a fallacy.
It's a fallacy.
Any cop will tell you it's incredibly hard to do, and it's not necessarily, if somebody is coming at you to attack you, them getting shot in the arm isn't going to necessarily make them go, oh, ouch, oh, okay, hey, don't do that again. I'll stop. No, it just pisses them off if it doesn't knock them down.
And Dave was around my family when
your mom was shot
with Harvey LaDucer took place. My mom's ex-husband, her estranged husband. She came home one night and he's comes out of the kitchen door that goes from the garage to the kitchen, and he's got a gun in his hand, and he shoots her point blank. She hits her in the chest, but it was a very small caliber. They called it a 21 caliber. It was a homemade gun. And so he shot her. She ran from him in the garage, went around the vehicles in the garage. He chased her. She got into the van and threw the keys in, smashed through the door of the garage backwards, and drove to the police station. And then he was a fugitive for 10 months. They were looking for him. But I look at that situation and I say, and we did find about something we didn't know about him, is he had committed twice prior to this attempted murders and did prison time. And one for a girlfriend that he blew up 20 years earlier. He put a pipe bomb under her car seat and blew her up. And she went through, her daughter called me when he was a fugitive and said, my mom's gone through 19 different surgeries, reconstructive surgeries over the last 20 years. And because of that. And they caught him for that. He did 6 years in prison. Meanwhile, she's in her 20th year of getting surgeries. Then he threatened me and my family, as I told this story very recently on my own show. But I used to sit up at nights out at our ranch with a shotgun, a loaded shotgun across my lap. And my wife had a revolver upstairs. And the kids were upstairs with her. And I would sit up all night in that living room in the ranch living room on that horse ranch. And out in the middle of nowhere, because he had sent word that he was going to come and kill me and my family.
Wow.
Now, the FBI, the guy who was the head of the FBI fugitive task force who I was working with, he told me, he says, if Leducer, which was his last name, if Leducer shows up at your door, he says, do not shoot, don't talk to him. He says, don't let him inside. Don't be wooed by him. Don't shoot him to wound him. He said, if he shows up at your house, you shoot him. He said, dot your I, which means 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. And he said, and if he doesn't have a weapon on it, you make sure he has a weapon by the time we get there. And this is what the FBI told me. He said, because this is a man who has tried to murder people in the past, probably has and gotten away with some.
Yep.
This is a guy who had no compunction killing your mom. Now, he didn't kill her. She did survive. No compunction trying to murder my mom. None wanting to murder me and my children and my wife at the time, my older kids. And so he said, you know what? He said, put him out of our misery. He says, if he shows up, he's not at your house for any other reason other than to do violence. He says, and you will make sure. And he said, if you shoot him outside the door, he says, drag him inside. And, he kind of laughed about that. I said, I don't want to leave a blood trail, do I? He says, no, just leave him where he falls. But this is how and it all started because he felt jilted by my mom. And the same thing with the woman he blew up 20 years earlier. She had broken up with him.
God.
And the daughter who called me, now this was 20 years later, so the daughter was about 30 to 32 years old when she's telling me this story while Leducer is a fugitive. He apparently had abused her sexually and told her, if you tell your mom, I will kill you both. And she ended up telling her mom. She was a 9-10-year-old kid. And her mom broke it off with him, and he ended up putting a pipe bomb under her car seat and didn't kill her. But and he is now dead. Dead as dead can be.
Well, that's probably the best place for him, if you don't mind.
I had some good friends of mine. Some of them you may know. Somebody who's Italian. And he said, Scotty, I know people. And I said, I know you know people. He says, you just say the word. Because by the way, Leducer got out of prison after 13 years. He was supposed to serve 20. He got out of prison. And what was it he told me? My Italian friend. He said, we know the bars where he frequents. We know that my whole, family is over there. He says, you just say the word. We'll pay him a visit.
I agree.
So we'll pay him a visit and make sure he doesn't cause your mom any trouble. And I said, all you need is the word? And he said, yeah, you just need the word. I said, the word is given. And a while later, it never came up again. And I said to this Italian friend of mine, I said, so remember that thing we talked about? He goes, oh, yeah, he was taken care of. And he says, I don't think you will ever have any problems from him. So, and I like that story because, this is a guy that tried to murder several people, probably did murder some we don't know about. And so he was out of prison and he died of emphysema or something like that. He was like 75 years old when he finally kicked.
Yeah, it's hard to breathe after you've had a pipe shoved through your chest. So
it really is. We like to call that emphysema.
But Michael came up with love and hate, and there's a. I was just reading this bit which says, for Ruth and David, love and hate were linked. They were the same, and both were strong as the other. So sex, drink, and violence were also ingredients which led to the death of both of them. They were in love and at war with one another at the same time. I mean, if you think about it, like it's so many people we have relationships with, you love them but you hate them, you can't imagine life with them, and you can't imagine life without them, and you get stuck back into that never-ending circle, which is what they were. And when there was a saying that he either gave her fists or flowers, never stability. So when just before, when she lost the baby, he'd written a note to her saying, I love you with all my love. I want to be with you. We're going to be together. So she's thinking, this is great. No matter what, we're going to be together. And then he just told her he never wanted to see her again. And she just went crazy. She just was like, what? And I was in a relationship with someone that every 3 to 6 weeks, he'd be like, I love you. I really love you. I'm really happy. I'm really happy with this environment.
I agree, Keith.
And then he would just be like, oh, I meant it at the time, but actually I
meant it on that day.
Exactly. And you're going from one foot to the other, wondering, going, what? And that is actually cruel. That is abuse. And I never thought about that at the time. Never thought about killing him, actually. But there were times I thought he might kill me. But I do think if you can actually bring up the pub, Scotty, the Magdala, so they can just see where the shooting took place. The Magdala, Magdala, the Magdala Tavern.
The Magdala Tavern. Oh, yeah.
The Magdala. You should be able to see the pub. And obviously somebody...
I saw some pictures of...
And then a landlady of the pub actually drilled holes in the wall to say, look, they're the bullet holes, to get more people going. But actually they weren't the bullet holes because she shot him on the floor, right?
Yeah. By the way, Tara, I'll tell you the whole story. We'll get together sometime. I'll tell you the story. But... yeah,
it was a crazy time
going through comics. Yeah, it was a crazy time
because we were all nervous about it.
What was interesting was he had shot my mom one night. My mom did karaoke. She ran karaoke shows, and she came home about 1:30, 2 in the morning, because she always did them in bars and closing. And she came home, and that's when he shot her. Was in the garage there. They found, by the way, sitting in that doorway from the garage, the step up into the kitchen, he was sitting in front of the stove in the kitchen, in front of that door, in a chair, and they found at least a pack and a half of cigarette butts.
He was just waiting for her.
He just sat there chain smoking, waiting for her to walk in that door.
Crazy.
And he had a pillow in one hand, she said, a throw pillow, and the gun. He was trying to muffle the sound. And I will add this on, is that I used to interact daily with a guy named Tom. I won't give his last name. He's the Fugitive Task Force, Minnesota Fugitive Task Force leader, FBI. And we started a little website, a friend of mine and I, called Citizen Observer. And we put up Harvey Leducer's mugshots and the story and all of that. And it spread around, and we started offering, your every sheriff's department in the country, that you could come in and you could set up your own 10 most wanted in your county type of thing on our website. And that thing grew, and we sold it off years ago. But That was all in that first few months. But the day he shot my mom would have been about 1:32 in the morning. I worked at an advertising agency in the city. We lived on the ranch, and my wife at the time had gone off somewhere. She dropped the kids at school, and I was in the city. And I got the neighbor called me who was down we had one big, long, about a quarter-mile dirt road that would go, and then it would curve into our barnyard. And we had one neighbor on that dirt road. And he called me up. No, he didn't call me. I got home that afternoon. And he said, there was... I saw him. He waved to me as I was driving by. I wanted to talk. And he said, there was a little red car pulled in here, he said, this morning, just before noon, and was looking for you. And the red car was my mom had a Ford Probe that he had stolen from the garage after he shot her. And so he drove out to my house that same morning, later in the morning. I was just off to work. My wife was gone for the day, and the kids were in school. And he drove out to our house. What were his intentions, do you think? Especially when the word on the street, he wanted to kill us all. And so it was very interesting how narrowly and how events sometimes work so that you narrowly escape something. So it's
I'm just
very
sending
interesting.
you this image so you can bring this up on... where are you? Here we are.
Yeah, I don't understand the killing your lover thing.
No, I don't either.
And I look at like in divorce and stuff where people after the divorce go back and kill their ex and stuff. Just walk away from it.
Just walk away.
Just
Go
walk
away.
away and start a new life. And I don't get it. I gave up everything, and yet I just went off and started anew.
Yep. But she still resides in your head.
And
she'll always reside there.
She's still got power. All the while they're in your head, they still have power.
They do.
She will forever. She is my soulmate. I love her to
need to
pieces.
take that power away from her. Yeah, there it is. There's the
picture of the gun that was used, and also the pub. When they're in your head, they have that power over you. And the thing is, like, don't you want to be wouldn't you like to find love again, my darling? Because you deserve it.
Don't know that I ever will open my heart in that way again.
Dave, when you have the feelings you do now, I hate to say it, I don't think there's room for anybody else in there. Too many people in there already.
Well, as I used to tell Dylan, because Dylan would get all upset when his biological father would come over. So his biological father lived 6 blocks away, that maybe once every 6 months would swing by and say hi to the kids. Lived 6 blocks away. Just emotionally vapid. Which is part of why Amy left him.
Sure.
But then Dylan would get all confused because he wanted to love his dad, but he felt guilty about loving me. And I would just have to say, look, your heart, the human heart, is capable of infinite love. You don't need to feel bad about loving people. There's no reason you should ever feel bad about loving people. I said, I want you to love your dad. I want you to have a good relationship with your dad. When your dad is ready to have a good relationship with you, I expect you to do that. But until then, you have me and you have other people in your life that care about you.
I truly believe, Dave, that the most 3 beautiful words are "I love you," and the 3 most dangerous words are "I love you."
I love you. Yeah,
very true.
And like I even said this, made this part of our vows, but Amy and I had this discussion long before we got to the point of talking about actually getting engaged again. And she was concerned about how I would feel with her having kids. And I said, those kids are a part of you, and I love you. How can I not love them?
Yeah.
There was never a step in my heart. They were my step kids, but I just thought of them and still think of them as my kids.
So this is the Magdala Tavern where Ruth was waiting outside the door for him to come out. And
okay, I just want to point out, in America, that building would look like a post office. So shootings there seem normal.
That's the Magdala Tavern in Hampstead, which I think is still there today. And you can go. A lot of people go because they want to see it. And obviously, his car was parked out front. She was waiting for him to come out the door. So yes, you could say she was definitely. I mean, I don't think he really. Well, I suppose for one moment when he was running around the car scared witless.
Oh, sorry.
Actually got her own back, or if that's the right way to put it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Quick Trip calling you to come in, do an extra shift.
The power.
Sorry, I have to text somebody because that's a business call.
But
I gotta text them and let them know. I'll call them back.
He sees her with the gun. He's like, oh my God. And now she's chasing, now she's walking, and she wouldn't run after him. She just walked. When you see the film Dance with a Stranger, you actually see that she was very, very calm, or she knew what she was doing. And he was trying to run away, and she was like, no, you're not going anywhere. And he must have felt fear for perhaps the first time in maybe his life. Who knows?
Yeah.
And maybe that's a good thing.
I think it is.
If he's abusive and all that, then I my personal feeling is he got what he deserved.
Yep,
absolutely,
he did. And there is justice one way or the other. I don't think she got what she deserved.
No, she didn't.
So
you can go and visit this. And the last picture we've got is the revolver, which is actually in the Metropolitan, isn't it, Police Museum.
But see, this is why I don't believe in the whole hell concept and stuff. There are people out there that would say, well, she went to hell because she committed murder, blah, blah, blah. I don't believe she committed murder. And I don't believe in the hell thing. There are different levels in the afterlife. And the more vile and terrible a person you are in this world, the lower you start back on that ladder, if you will, working your way up. It's all a vibrational thing. The higher vibration is the goal. But when you're at a real base level here, someone like a Nazi concentration camp commandant, vibrating very low, very primal. When that person crosses over, they're very low on that list. It's going to take them eons to get back up to that higher level.
Right.
But if indeed we all set out in this world, in the corporeal world, with a purpose, before we cross over, come back and are reborn, we're here to learn something or to teach something. Okay. So in this case, maybe she needed to go through a process of learning what it is to lose a child like that. Maybe it was teaching him that you can't get away with that kind of stuff. There's any number of lessons to be learned out of that, and they're both fulfilling their fated mission on this time around.
She paid the highest price at 28 years of age, leaving behind 2 children.
Sure.
But Matthew, I really don't know what you're going on about, because it's a completely different subject, I think, there, sweetie. But I will say,
I don't see that. I can't see the comments. So
he's talking about the Egyptian Book of the Dead,
which is not anything that we're talking about.
No.
But I do think that if you get a chance to watch Dance with a Stranger, it's a fascinating film to watch. And I think that, you're quite right. You meet people for a reason, or a season, or a lifetime. Some are toxic, some are bad, some are great, some are wonderful. They're all lessons. But maybe was she down here, obviously like 25 and 28. That's no age.
Yep.
At all. Nothing.
Yep.
All right, I'm getting calls left and right, so I'm going to have to. I've got to take off.
I'm just going to assume their new shirt business is going viral and it's just exploding on stuff. So that's all good news.
It could very well be. All right. So I think we should draw this to a close.
Absolutely.
Sorry that
Blessings
my
on both
phone's
of
ringing.
you.
That's not the best way to end a show, but at least we had a good conversation. Uncle Dave, thanks for
I'm out of
joining
here.
us. Appreciate it. Good to see you, brother. And Wendy, as always, good to see
It's
you.
always a pleasure, darling.
Always a pleasure. And we'll talk more. I would do my traditional call after the show, but I've got to step away.
Don't worry. It's lovely to see you. You look amazing. Thank you to everybody that joined us tonight and has joined in. I hope people have found this subject interesting. And I'm sorry we didn't get to talk to Michael more. And it was lovely, Uncle Dave.
I know. Sorry, Michael, that we're having tech problems with you.
Till next week, darling.
All right. Good to see you, Wendy. Everybody else, live long and prosper. We're going to get out of here now. If I was ready with the prompt button, we'd already be gone. So here we go. Thanks for being here. Wendy, I love you. We'll talk to you all soon. Bye.
Bye.